You can say this, Guilherme. We'll have an opportunity. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for waiting. We are here live, so welcome to our third quarter live results from the Hermes Pardini Group. Everyone will be on listen-only mode, and we are live. By the end of this presentation, we'll be starting the Q&A session. You can ask your questions solely in the chat. I will be reading out questions, and our officers will reply to them. Our attendees won't be able to unmute to ask questions. When you write your questions, please add your name and company. You can go to www.hermespardini.com.br/ri for our results center. Before we proceed, we'd like to say that any forward-looking statements during this conference call regarding our business perspectives, forecasts, and operating goals are beliefs and assumptions by the Hermes Pardini Institute, as well as are based on information that are currently available to the company. These future forecasts are not any guarantee of performance. They relate to events from the future and may rely on circumstances that may or may not happen. Overall economic conditions and other factors could have an impact on future results and could lead to results that are materially different from the ones that are expressed in these forward-looking statements. Today we have Dr. Roberto Santoro, our CEO, Alessandro Ferreira, our Sales and Marketing VP, Camilo de Lelis, our CFO and IRO, Adriana Linhares, our PSC Business Executive Officer, Guilherme Colares, our COO, Fernando Ramos, our Executive Director for the Lab-to-Lab business, João Alvarenga, our IT and Digital Executive Officer, and I am also here to read the questions. Now I would like to hand it over to Mr. Roberto Santoro, our CEO. Roberto, you may begin. Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to say that regarding our results, we broke another record in the volume of exams. In the third quarter, we had 37.3 million tests, which is another record. This volume was only possible thanks to the excellent results of the deployment of the enterprise project. It was also possible because of our unprecedented model for intelligence in diagnostic medicine, especially with clinical analysis. We broke this record in volume, especially because of our productive model based on enterprise and our advanced technical center, specialized technical centers, and hospital technical centers, and we have faster, more accurate result tests. Our test results. For the PSC segment, Camilo will be sharing numbers, but we had 25% in gross revenue for the PSC business units compared to the third quarter of last year. Excluding COVID-19 tests, we got 34% of growth in the PSC segment. When compared to the third quarter of 2019, meaning before the pandemic, the gross revenue growth was 50% in the PSC segment. This big increase in volume happened in Minas Gerais, Goiânia, and also São Paulo. When it comes to imaging tests, clinical testing, we had double-digit growth year over year. Also, our imaging tests are now accredited by the PADI program, the accreditation program in diagnostic imaging issued by the Brazilian College of Radiology. In every location, we are also investing in renovating our units, working with our customer service and working with better targeting. We are improving our technology interface when it comes to client-operator relationships in the blockchain. This is really important. We're also working with prescribing doctors, and we're trying to improve these processes to get to better satisfaction in the PSC journey, especially with more efficiency in service. When it comes to the PSC, let me also talk about growth in São Paulo. We had significant growth in this market. This is the biggest market for diagnostics medicine in Brazil, and we are getting ready for even bigger exponential growth in the metropolitan region of São Paulo. We were chosen through a bid from a big insurance company with 700,000 beneficiaries in the city of São Paulo and its metropolitan region. We have certain plans and certain categories for which we are their exclusive provider for diagnostic medicine. Since October, our 5 locations from the Hermes Pardini Group in São Paulo have been performing tests in clinical analysis, anatomical pathology, and nuclear medicine for the patients of this big HMO. We also expect other tests to have gradual growth as other labs become no longer accredited and as their network is resized. We know that some of their plans will be forwarded to our proprietary network in São Paulo. Because of this contract, in November, we'll be launching a new location in the city of São Paulo in the neighborhood of Moema. For 2022, we expect 5 new locations in São Paulo and its metropolitan region. We also have a lot of potential for inorganic growth and other growth opportunities in this city. Now let's move on to the lab-to-lab segment. The revenue of the lab-to-lab unit year-over-year, or actually quarter-over-quarter, grew 5%. But please remember that we had a lot of COVID-19 tests in the previous quarter. Now, when we no longer take into account these COVID-19 tests, our growth in the lab-to-lab segment was 34%, in addition to the other volumes that we've already mentioned. And in lab-to-lab, not only do we have traditional support through B2B, but we also have other possibilities that are new business opportunities to truly expand our relationship with lab-to-lab clients. As we've said before in other messages, we have the hospital support initiative, for example. And we also have the parties distributor, which goes hand in hand with the needs that we have for lab-to-lab customers in Brazil. This represents 4% of our gross revenue for this quarter, with the hospital support initiative and the parties distributor. What is also interesting here is that you may remember the acquisition of a lab in Itajaí called Solução. This is a lab for production and support, but this is also a supporting brand. The Solução brand has been integrated by Pardini after the acquisition. We started in Santa Catarina in Itajaí with around 220,000 tests. However, we had major growth. We are at around 500,000 tests, and we have a project which is underway, and our capacity will be 1 million tests in the city of Itajaí. So we broke a record with 500,000, but we'll double this number in this region. And this goes hand in hand with our strategy of being closer to customers in the south of Brazil, especially in Santa Catarina, because we're taking distances and logistics into account. This will boost our presence in the south of Brazil, where we have major potential for growth because of its production models, its logistics, and agility in creating test reports. In B2B, we can also talk about the hospital support initiative. We are collaborating with Unimed in Fortaleza, and we are expanding our collaboration with them in the state of Ceará. We are in a hospital called HRU, which is one of the biggest private hospitals in Ceará, with over 330 operating beds and over 50 beds for the ICU. We are also in another 2 locations for emergency rooms in Fortaleza. This adds to this vertical. Our Hospital Technical Center by the Pardini Group is located in the facilities of the HRU. We have top-notch technology with the capacity to process 5 million tests a year. In the third quarter, we started using our Advanced Technical Center, which is actually a hospital technical center in Fortaleza, to also perform tests more quickly to our clients in the northeast of Brazil. This is a strategic initiative for Pardini to be more competitive in this region. Our strategy with advanced centers, in this case a hospital center in Sao Paulo, is a part of that. Guilherme will also be talking about it. We have different clients in these cases. Of course, we are in a verticalized structure in a hospital for an HMO, but we're also servicing our local clients in a more quick way. And according to our production model, we are working on these ideas created by the Enterprise project, which is our big production model and which is expanded to local realities and local needs. This is how we're able to get to really quick turnaround times, and this increases our competitiveness locally. Let me also talk about other platforms. Precision Care is our biggest summary of a study on the journey of clients and stakeholders with the Pardini Group. We want to get to the best platform possible to cater to different clients with different needs. That includes hospitals, the pharmaceutical industry, HMOs, physicians, etc., etc. We have an ecosystem of clients. We've been improving this platform, and Precision Care is a summary of all of these improvements. We've improved a lot in the past year because we've invested a lot in these platforms for the interface with various clients. We've truly created a digital system for diagnostic medicine with a lot of integration. In upcoming weeks, we'll go into the first stage of our technology platform, especially for our prescribing physicians for the PSC segment. They will be able to use a website to order tests, to order repeated tests if necessary, and to get access to technical and scientific support. They will also be able to request tests for their own patients through this new interface. Now, with the Enterprise project in the past few years, our priority was to digitalize and improve our interface with many clients, like physicians, patients, HMOs, labs, partnering hospitals, and mainly the pharmaceutical industry and other clients. When it comes to diagnostic medicine in Brazil and the Pardini Group, it represents a big infrastructure business with great balance between two different segments, PSC and lab to lab. But let me underscore what I've been saying. In the previous conference calls, I said that we are strong in our belief that we should strengthen diagnostic medicine in Brazil because this is key for our healthcare supply chain. We need infrastructure for great diagnostic medicine, and there's no primary care without diagnostic medicine, which is more and more efficient with improved portfolios, with P&D or R&D, with testing, etc., etc. We should also work on our needs to improve portfolio and improve accuracy. And finally, we need to follow trends in oncology to have better, more precise, accurate testing so that we can make for better treatments as well. That is why we have been investing so much in this kind of specialization service and highly specialized testing. Finally, I would like to thank everyone in the Pardini Group all over the country for the excellent results we've achieved and which we are now presenting to you. Now I'll be handing over to Camilo, our CFO and IRO, so he can talk about our results. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Good morning, everyone, all participants. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here for our call for results. Once again, we've broken our record for volumes, processing over 37.3 million tests during this period. It's worthy to point out that when we had the enterprise plan put together 3 years ago, we had foreseen reaching those volumes. So we are just performing, accomplishing what we had forecasted 3 years ago. So due to this record volume is due to the technical stability of the enterprise production model that presented a reduction in times to delivery the test reports. When compared to the other quarters, we had a record third quarter volume, record revenue, and record for gross revenue and EBITDA. Once again, a historical record for test volumes as forecasted 3 years ago. The volume of tests presented a growth of 29.5% in the third quarter when compared to third quarter 2020 year over year. It's important to point out that the accumulated volume during this period up to September, 104 million tests, and last year this was 70 million tests. So 50% higher during this period accumulated. The processed volume during the third quarter totaled 37.3 million, another historical record for our company. In the lab-to-lab collection channel, we had a growth both in the low complexity tests as well as in specialized tests, as tailored medicine, personalized medicine, and toxicology. Hospital support, PARDIS distribution, and COVID exams tests also contributed for growth. So it's important to underscore that the hospital revenue contributes with 4% of our total revenue today. In the PSC collection channel, we have presented a growth of volume throughout the entire quarter in all locations, except for Rio de Janeiro. The imaging tests also presented growth of 2 digits considering third quarter of 2020. Such a growth came throughout all locations where we do business. In terms of clinical analysis, growth was double-digit as well, even disregarding COVID-19 tests. Third quarter figures also incorporate volumes from our last acquisition, Paulo Azevedo lab, acquired in the second quarter of 2021. Now we talk about gross revenue. Gross revenue presented a growth of 14.2% on the third quarter of 2021, reaching 548.3 million BRL. Growth came from both collection channels, even when compared to the pre-pandemic period, disregarding, of course, COVID-19 revenue. It's important to highlight that growth came even when compared to a already strong baseline, considering that the third quarter of 2020 had already been a record gross revenue for the company up until then. On PSC, there was a growth of ex-COVID revenue in all locations. Growth also came from clinical analysis, with the exception of Rio de Janeiro, as we mentioned, as well as imaging. In all locations we do business, we have recorded growth in imaging tests. The positive highlights came from locations from Minas Gerais and Goiás. Even though they're locations where we have a mature operation, we noticed a double-digit growth even when compared to the pre-pandemic period and disregarding revenue coming from COVID-19 tests. Lab-to-lab revenue gained with low complexity tests had significant growth, double-digit. There was also growth in toxicology tests and personalized medicine. An important role in this growth was the revenue coming from Apoio Hospitalar, the hospital support, and PARDIS Distribuidora. We were able to present growth in the lab-to-lab revenue, even comparing to the pre-pandemic period and disregarding COVID-19 tests. Now let's talk about gross profit. Gross profit presented during this period 21.5% growth when compared to the same period of the prior year, especially due to the uptake of recurring revenue. Passover of lab-to-lab prices occurred in March 2021, an increase in toxicological tests due to changes in legislation. Gross margin for third quarter presented an increase of 219 basis points when compared to the third quarter of 2020. Now we're going to talk a bit about EBITDA, net profit, and ROI. EBITDA reached 121.6 million on the third quarter, presenting a growth of 5.2% compared to the third quarter of 2020. Now, it's extremely important to explain the increase in general expenses with sales, admin, and a small reduction in net profit. As to general admin expenses, what we were able to record that the prior period, a third quarter of 2020, was the pandemic period, where there was a period where we accounted a reduction in working times. So there was a salary reduction. It was a period where there was no payment of variable income, so profit sharing as well. It's also to point out that there is a certain cost within SG&A, which is highly variable. Sales commissions, for example. As I mentioned before, we have recorded 50% increase in volume compared to the prior period. That also increases our commissions over sales, which obviously affect the line of expenses with sales. So considering all these aspects I have mentioned, these two moments are extremely different. Third quarter of 2021, where we have already accounted for profit sharing, increase in sales commissions. We have recorded costs related to new acquisitions, especially Paulo Azevedo Lab, and compared to the prior year where these costs did not exist. So we recorded an increase not compared to the previous period. These are different scenarios, so they should be analyzed individually, line per line, to see what happened. Actually, the increase in cost, we have increase in headcount, also due to new businesses, Pardis distributor and Apoio Hospitalar. That reflects less than 2% of SG&A. It's important from now on to try to organize and track these variations. On the other hand, net profit, there's a reduction of 12% compared to the prior period. And also there are some effects that we have to clarify. First, at the end of last year, our PSC, Goiás standard, reached the limit of revenue that was taxed by the taxation bracket we're in. So now, after December 2021, it's going to be taxed over actual profit, and that influences differences between the periods. Another factor we registered was that in 2020, due to the pandemic, the first and second quarters, we recorded a fiscal loss. The fiscal loss was completely absorbed in the third quarter, where there was a beginning of a growth again. So when we recorded a high profit in the third quarter of 2020, we absorbed all the fiscal loss that we had recorded in the first and second quarters. Compared to this period now, where net profit before taxes is higher than last year, we have a theoretical fiscal rate higher than last year. It was around 20% last year. We record today around 28, 29% this year. So it's extremely important to break down these variations, both on SG&A as well as net profit, the taxation effects. However, I'd like to point out that if we compare profit before expenses and financial expenses, on the third quarter of 2021, we had 98 million reais. Compared to last year, there was a growth of around 5%, basically what we're recording EBITDA today. On the other hand, ROI, excluding, was a third quarter, 205 basis points increase compared to the prior period. Our operational cash flow was 121.2 million reais, growth of 50% compared to the same period before. In accordance to our commitment of generating value to our shareholders and investors, we declared 10 million of JCP with a cutting date of 8th of December and payment for 30th of December. We continue extremely focused on disallowances and delinquency. So only 0.3% of disallowances and delinquency in our group. I would like to make it clear that we move forward with our expansion plan strong with organic and inorganic growth in a scenario of deacceleration of COVID products. Our goal is for this organic and inorganic growth ramp up are going to compensate for the COVID test reduction in 2022. We are highly trusting in the innovative fronts in expanding our core business and also in the growth possibilities of our performance through partnerships and acquisitions, always based on value generation for our shareholders and our diligence and in-depth knowledge of the healthcare industry dynamic in Brazil. Now, I would like to open the session for questions and answers. Please feel free. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camilo, and thank you, Roberto. We can now start the Q&A session. We have the first question here, and please remember, if you have questions, you can write them in the chat with your name so that we know who this question comes from. Here's our first question from Eugenia Cavaliero from JP Morgan. They work on coverage for our shares and they know our case really well. Hi, can you please talk about price increases in the PSC business? What do you think about inflation? Hi, Eugenia, good morning. Yes, we do see inflation because of COVID-19 tests and supplies. Last year, we had restrictions on supply and scarcity. We also had other procedures being adopted because of sanitation measures. Now, with the increase in vaccination levels, according to the data we see for most of the population, plus a big drop in the number of cases, and also as we resume competitiveness for the supply of certain products, I do believe we'll have less inflation from now on. Sanitation authorities may also adapt so that we can resume prior levels when it comes to the need to use different supplies and products. Right now, HMOs are using protocols for infectious diseases, and we'd used this only for very severe cases in the past. So I think these things will change as time goes by. Of course, it is a point of concern, but we do expect for readjustments in the PSC. But when we think about the impacts of our mix, we don't think we're going to go through a very tough time when it comes to prices. We'll have some price transfers and the specialization of our mix of products. So we expect to make up for some of it, and with our mix of products, we expect to keep our same pricing for the future. Thank you, Roberto. Our next question is from Vinicius Figueiredo, Itaú BBA, who is also an analyst for the sell side in this industry. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking my question. My first question is about the competitive scenario in lab to lab. We see you were able to transfer prices effectively, especially at the beginning of the year. What do you think about pricing for the competition, since they are also implementing adjustments? Our second point is, you said PSC had good growth in mature locations like Minas Gerais and Goiás. However, can you please talk about the recovery of your operations in Rio de Janeiro, please? Of course. I can start this answer. Thank you for your question, Vinicius. Let me talk a bit more about PSC, and then Alessandro and Fernando can talk about lab to lab. When it comes to the PSC segment, we had significant growth in Minas and Goiânia, and also in São Paulo. First, Minas and Goiânia, because we had major investments and the introduction of new locations, especially in 2015. With this growth, we got better outreach, we invested in cosmetics, we renovated these locations, and we created a journey in these locations, especially for Minas and Goiânia. We are reaping the fruit now. And at the time, especially after 2014, we know that we saw fewer people with private insurance. We had very good growth by 2014 until 2014, and then we saw decreases. And that's when we expanded the most in Minas and Goiânia. We had fixed costs, we had a slower ramp up, but we were investing, we were betting on the future. This is related to our beliefs, which we've kept for a long time. We've believed in improving our locations, improving the flow, and improving customer experience, and we are reaping the fruit now. At the time, we made major investments in Goiânia, Minas Gerais, and especially in the city of Belo Horizonte. So instead of reducing costs and investments in 2014, when we had a dire scenario, we did the opposite. We maintained our fixed costs, but we worked on saturation and slow ramping up. We've been growing in Rio de Janeiro, and we've been improving our product mix. We renovated every location, and we opened the Guanabara Center. We fully changed our company from hospitality to portfolio. We also changed our advanced center. We optimized it. We changed the portfolio. We got new equipment for MRIs and nuclear medicine. We fully revamped the company. We are about diagnostic medicine and clinical analysis, not only imaging any longer. So clinical analysis is growing more than imaging. And we have something very specific in Rio de Janeiro with one HMO which stopped collaborating with us. So they decided to stop our collaboration, but it's very likely for us to recover this collaboration because of the investments we've been making in Rio. So the numbers we see in Rio are impacted from this HMO leaving our collaboration, and they do have a high number of customers. But we keep on growing, and we are likely to resume our cooperation with one of the biggest HMOs there. Excluding this HMO, we've been growing. We've been increasing our NPS. We've been investing a lot. The Guanabara Center is a really special center with a lot of potential. When it comes to the lab to lab, before I turn it over to Alessandro, I would like to say that we had price decreases because of a lot of competition in the past few years. You know, during certain times, this business wasn't even that attractive because of the competition. And I think we need to raise awareness among the competition because this is complex service. Lots of infrastructure, lots of logistics, lots of science and technology, interfaces, infrastructure, IT. It's so complex that we need to bring these prices up. Prices have gone down in the past years, and I think we need to raise awareness among the competition. And I think there has been a lot of competition for gaining market share. So competitiveness will still be strong, but I think we need to raise awareness that Given the complexity and given the investments in these business, it's not even about increasing prices. It is about recovering prices as time goes by because of how much we've lost in original prices because of a tough competition in the past years. And everyone who goes into this business wants to gain market share, and this sometimes has an impact on price. But overall, I think we do have the potential to organize this recovery more structurally. It's not even about transferring prices. It is about an important, a crucial recovery in prices to make up for the margin we lost in the past years because of the competition. I don't think the competition was really paying attention to this in the past. Would you like to say something, Fernando? Yes, of course. Let me talk about the PSC, Roberto. In Rio de Janeiro, we have a very specific HMO relationship scenario compared to other locations. And this group worked on the rebranding of our medical center. We changed our brand. We changed the structure of our locations for this industry, and we invested a lot in digital marketing. We want to show users and patients our new face, our new brand. This has been contributing to our growth in Rio de Janeiro with new contracts, new agreements, and new markets as well, especially out of pocket. This is a relevant thing in São Paulo a while back, and we are reaping great fruit right now. Our relationship at the Hermes Pardini Group with HMOs, due to many of our initiatives and due to market conditions, is really, really good right now. So we've been getting to great negotiations with HMOs in every location. We are really optimistic about results in PSC. We still have a lot of great things to build in specialization in many of these locations. When it comes to lab, as Roberto said, we are now aware that we lost too much on price in the past and we need to recover. We lost on price and other players also did. But we do need to point out that the competition scenario changed because this market grew. With the pandemic, there was more outsourcing for tests. Labs started outsourcing more. No labs closed down during the pandemic, which is really important for us to notice. Actually, the number of labs we have in this industry is bigger now. So this leads to an increase. And this means that the competition won't be not as aggressive, but there will be more possibility to grow. Excluding COVID, we can see very good organic growth for the lab-to-lab segment. This happens not only because of a market dynamic where we have a bigger market and price transfers, but also because this market grew in the number of outsourceable tests. We see labs that are no longer using their own machinery and that are outsourcing more. Of course, we have SLAs, we have TATs, we have scientific support agreements, but the Pardini Group has all that infrastructure to offer. We can offer this to the market and we can offer this through the enterprise project. So lastly, I would say that the enterprise project is running at excellent levels, excellent level of services. And this adds to what we see in this competitive scenario. You know, we see that usually when we got regional support, and we would talk about this 2 or 3 years ago, these initiatives with regional support are not as strong as they used to be. We bought one of them. We are using one of them as our headquarters for local support, and this has been changing the competition as well. Fernando, do you have anything to add? Yes, thank you, Alessandro. I think both you and Roberto already talked about our competitive scenario in the lab-to-lab segment. So I think it is important to tell investors that we are still really competitive in the lab-to-lab segment. It is a tough segment, as Roberto was saying, but in this segment, we can see that we have more rational decisions when it comes to pricing in our competition, in our biggest competitors, both nationwide and with the competitors who are working in a more regional way. Vinicius asked about what we see when it comes to pricing by competitors and what we think about it. Overall, Vinicius, as we have been saying in the previous results presentations, when we look into the past 3 or 4 years back, in 2019, we saw really aggressive competitors, and this had an impact on our pricing. We saw the same thing up until the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, but as of March of 2020, we saw more rational decisions by our competitors, a lot more rational decisions. So of course, this allows us not only to apply price adjustments, which we did by the end of the first quarter, and we saw the results as of the beginning of the second quarter. But what is also important is that we work with a metric at the Pardini Group called price index. We look at our tickets according to two big pillars. Number one, the mix of products. Number two, the average price. For the price index, we isolate some of these factors and we look at price. And we see stability in the price index since April, which is when we finished our readjustments. So this goes to show that we were able to truly adjust prices, and we basically have stable prices excluding COVID results. Now, looking at the COVID-19 market, yes, we do see aggressive competition. These competitors made big investments to decentralize their production models. And of course, they made this investment as demand was going down, so they had to be aggressive in pricing. We saw big drops in prices for RT-PCR in comparison to what we had 6 months ago or a year ago. But this is a one-off effect. When we look at our recurring portfolio, which is the most important thing, we see more rational decisions and more ability to be competitive. We also see more ability to grow this market, bring more clients in, increase the outsourcing in our clients, which is what we call same lab sales, without compromising on price levels. This is an important message.
Regarding lab to lab, there was major investment in our production model in terms of advanced centers, expert centers. It's important to characterize our current model of production today, whether on the enterprise centralized model, parties, advanced models, specialized models, just to provide a snapshot over to investors and shareholders in terms of how it's been working, at least an overall idea of our infrastructure. We're talking about lab to lab, about the needs, the size of the operation, investments, and we came to an extremely interesting model of advanced centers that many times comprise our PSCs, our specialized centers, given our track into personalized and tailored medicine, the hospital centers. Guilherme, could you give us an overall? Of course, Roberto, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First, would like to mention that the enterprise project has been concluded, so all the technical areas are already working under this model, with the central area of Belo Horizonte with an extremely high level of automation, also specialization, working at full throttle and reaping the results in terms of turnaround times, process safety, security, considering risks in lab production. So this is extremely positive, but also in NTAs, the technical centers, they're already implemented. So the same service we have in Belo Horizonte, we have in the technical center of Santa Catarina, technical centers of Goiânia, Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, both centers in Belo Horizonte. We have 2 centers here, Fortaleza, and in Belém, it's what we're still implementing systems. We should have flipping the switch early next year, and they will be ready to come into this network. And we have the expert centers also for more specialized tests, one in Rio, one in São Paulo, for metabolism, for all the genetics, personalized medicine, latest generation sequencing, and also pathological anatomy. We had a recent acquisition, PC, and occupational toxicology, also in Belo Horizonte, for occupational toxicology for drug testing over hair. And also the whole structure of hospitals this year, the 5 hospitals that are serviced, 6 actually, 4 in Belém, the Fortaleza Hospital, and one in Belo Horizonte. All of this interconnected in this network where we control the service level in a centralized way. So the same Pardini we have here in Belo Horizonte is what we have in all these centers that we mentioned, with the same service level, same quality, same level of care, same level of service to customer service, which is extremely important, in a way that we can use these networks in diverse forms, increasing our capacity even more, surpassing the volumes that we had expected, as Camilo mentioned, before the enterprise project. So these volumes are coming, and we can distribute production in the most intelligent way with all the logistic we have to produce where it's most interesting for the customer to have the fastest test result with the same safety, with the same assurance. This process is dynamic in a way that if there's a change in airways network in the grid, we can produce the tests in a different location in terms of time for delivery, so we can make those changes in a way that customers will have the best center to produce their test for it to be fastest, safest, with the highest quality, and that would be in accordance to the availability, logistic changes. So we're truly ready for the future, all the growth that we desire and expect for the coming years. Thank you very much, Roberto, for this opportunity. Thank you, Colares. We do not have any further questions over the chat feature, so I hand the floor back to Dr. Roberto for his closing words. I would once again like to thank all of those who are here for your time over this interface with Pardini. I would like to underscore the importance of diagnostic medicine in a healthcare ecosystem in primary and secondary care as an independent company, an infrastructure company that has to invest in R&D. And our portfolios have to cater to the basic needs of outpatients in general, so that they can work preventively, especially in primary care. This is a worldwide model, not just a Brazilian model. Our belief is that this type of medical attention care has to grow. And if we consider a recovery of income and lives, considering the healthcare system in Brazil, if we don't have organic expansion in this industry, I fear we will have lack of diagnostic medicine in the coming years if we have a great recovery along those lines. So showing the importance of this industry as an agent in the whole chain, and with all the necessary investments, intelligence for it to develop. And in closing, once again, like to thank not just the employees, but all our directors, shareholders, investors. Our investor relations area is available through Carlos Bier, Camilo, Vinicius, for any additional questions you may have. Thank you so much, and I will see you